We've got our friend Gordon Dundas joining us. Gordon is the brand ambassador for Glengoyne, Tamdhu, Rosebank. I guess Smokehead we could throw in there too.
Yeah, I do a bit of Smokehead. Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, we've got a whole host of other brands that we do a little bit of work on. One of my favorite, which is ones you may not see a lot of, is one called 6 Isles, which is a blended malt from 6 different islands. Brilliant whiskey. We need to do more with it, but yeah, we've got a few other things we do stuff with, but those are the main ones. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, the 6 Isles. I've not heard of that. I mean, you have Isla Mist as well too. I think falls into your. Or
it's not us actually, but we do have. I mean, we're actually building a distillery on Isla now as well. So we're going to be building the 12th distillery on Isla. So there's 9 currently. And then there's going to be Port Ellen, and then there's going to be Port Natruan, which is Sukhinder Singh, and we'll be building the 12th, which is going to be called just opposite the airport, actually. So it's going to be called Lagan Bay. So that's going to be exciting.
It'll be the easiest one to fly in and out of.
Very easy, yeah. Literally, you can stumble across the airport from the distillery. Yeah.
Are you going to be within range of the golf course?
Yeah, we're not far from the golf course, but literally right opposite. I mean, you cannot. When I say opposite the airport, I genuinely mean right opposite the airport on Isla.
Cool.
If anybody's been.
If anyone needs another reason to go to Isla, there'll be 12 distilleries. When do you think that'll be up and running, Gordon?
Couple of years' time.
Couple of years' time.
Although building distilleries on Isla is quite challenging.
And political as well.
I'm very political. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, that's cool. Well, Gordon, before we dive into the lineup, anything kind of exciting coming down the pipeline that we should be aware of? Glengoyne, Tamdhu, Rosebank.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, you know, it's been a busy year for us, and you know, I think the sort of crux really from our perspective is that we sell, you know, Glengoyne, Tamdhu, and Rosebank. We have what we have. We don't have loads of stock of these products, so we're sort of selling what we have. But Glengoyne, we're looking at some new releases towards the end of the year, and you know, still doing what it does really, really well. Tamdhu. Absolutely, we've got the 18, which you're going to try tonight, which is a fabulous dram, but just all the way through the sherry casks, and then really the final part is obviously Rosebank, which is going to be opening. We're going to be producing spirit, I think, in about 6 to 8 weeks. So that's going to be the first spirit running from those stills, and we will be open to the public, I think, October, November.
It's exciting.
It is.
Because you took over some of the existing buildings, like
yeah,
I remember going there and there was like I think it was like a beef eater pub or something.
Still is a beef eater pub.
There's still a beef eater pub, so you haven't taken that one over?
No, but the other site across the other side's all ours. So we've retained the canal side buildings, and we've built a brand new still house and a brand new sort of, but exactly the same shape stills as the old ones that were stolen. And worm tub condensers, and a beautiful modern distillery on the existing site. So, but we're not going to see a whiskey from there until 2030, probably at the earliest, probably.
Well, still very, very cool. I know a couple of customers and we went there specifically to eat at the pub just so we could kind of feel like we'd been to Rosebank. And it was an okay meal.
No, it's not great,
but that wasn't the reason we were there. We were there to say we'd been to Rosebank.
Well, you'll be all able to come and tour it very soon. So
it's exciting.
So it is very exciting.
Well, Gordon, yeah, we've got 8 whiskeys, and we don't want to keep you here all night. So you either start with the whiskey, or you can start with an intro.
Okay.
And if you want to share your screen, you're welcome to as well too. So
no, I haven't. I haven't got a presentation. It's a Saturday afternoon for you. It's midnight for me. It's let's just talk whiskey and have a bit of a laugh. So that's very much my attitude.
Perfect.
So yeah, no, look, if anybody, there's a few faces I recognize, which is nice to see. But it's yeah, nice to be here. And I know there's probably quite a few Glengoyne fans out there, I hope. But yeah, no, look, just to give you a bit of a background of where we are with Glengoyne, we're I mean, it's a beautiful little distillery. Who's been to Glengoyne? Anybody been in the group? Andrew's been. Anybody else? No? Oh my God. There we
Kurt
go.
Kurt gets to Scotland and he beelines for Isla. It's either
Yeah.
Isla or Campbellton, one of the two. So
I would do like you, Andrew. I would be distillery bagging all over the place if I could. But the last like 4 or 5 times I've been over, it's been me leading tours. And when I lead tours, I let the attendees choose where we go, basically. Of course, there's Mecca for everybody, and everybody wants to go up to Glendronach. So it kind of means we miss a few things, sadly.
What I notice is a lot of people who come into the Central Belt flying to Edinburgh, Glasgow on their way to maybe Fay Shield or up to Speyside Whiskey Festival or whatever, they all drop into Glengoyne on the way somewhere because it's a popular place to come. So it's very accessible to Glasgow. But I mean, I think, yeah, no, it's a small distillery and we've owned it for 20 years now. So we bought it in 2003. So we've had it for 20 years. And in that 20 years, we've really gone, when we took it over, it was only producing about 10% of its spirit was going for single malt. It was mainly used for blends. It was going into Famous Grouse and all these types of products because it was owned by Edrington at that point. So it was a sister, if you want, to Macallan. I think what's very interesting about Glengoyne is that we do use a lot of sherry casks, but it's actually fabulous in bourbon as well. So we'll see a little bit of how that influence comes through in the whiskies that we're going to try. But the other thing for those who maybe don't know is that Glengoyne it's right on the geographically, it's right on the lowest part of the Highlands. It's the road that runs in front of the distillery is the border between the Highlands and the Lowlands, not the geographical ones. I'm talking about the whiskey regions. So it's actually matured in the Lowlands, but it doesn't. I'd love to say that makes a difference, but it doesn't really. Yeah, and it's a small distillery. It produces 1 million liters a year. So for those who, there we go. Yeah, so that's the road there. I'm glad you produced the pictures.
Well, Gordon, I kind of felt bad that no one has been on the tastings been to Glengoyne because Evan's not on the tasting tonight, but he was there with me. We did a speed tour of Glengoyne because his flight was delayed due to weather, and we were supposed to go to Erin. And
yes, I remember that.
And the guy who was showing us around, who was an absolute gem and a gentleman, just could not appreciate that we only had roughly 15 minutes to see Glengoyne because we had to drive all the way around to,
I remember,
the north end of Erin to catch the ferry from the top because the main ferry had closed, and we barely made it. And not that this relates to Glengoyne, but the craziest part of the whole story is the ferry had left without us. I actually have a photo of us watching the ferry head to Erin. We've missed it by seconds, and it came back for us, which I've been told by many people that is not something that happens commonly with Calmac ferries. If you miss the ferry, you miss the ferry. It's gone. So yeah, I'm trying to load that up here. Anyway, it was, I couldn't believe it. I thought we were going to have to sleep on the side of the road, somewhere up there, but we got a ferry.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a real issue with ferries in Scotland at the moment, but we'll not go into that. But yeah, if it came back for you, that's fabulous because you're lucky it was there in the first place, if I'm honest. So, that's great. But yeah, I remember that. That was you did the quickest tour around Glengoyne, and actually, it's quite good for that because it's a pretty small site. It's the still house you can walk around in about 3.5 seconds. But I mean, our main thing as a distiller, and we'll try the 15 very shortly because this is a whiskey tasting ahead of anything else. So make sure you have your 15 ready to go. Is that we actually have a 3 still setup. So we have one wash still and then 2 spirit stills, but it's still a double distillation. It's all about copper contact, and our big thing is about, I could talk to you about stills and still shapes and things like that, which is hugely important. And here we go. So you can see the wash still there on the far side, the 2 spirit stills on the near side, and are simply the low wines is, the charge into the spirit stills is split between those two stills to increase copper contact. And you can see these boil pots just above the, on the way up, that helps more reflux. But the one thing that a lot of people will tell you that, still shapes are crucial to the spirit style of whiskey. And that is absolutely correct. But also, so is the process beforehand in terms of, the yeast that you're using, in terms of the wort that you create, whether it's cloudy or not. These are the types of things which will help you go down a particular route. Kirk may well know, and anybody who's an Islay whiskey fan, is you will distill in a different way in Islay if you're wanting to retain as much phenolics as you want. You'll distill, you'll fill your stills up, you'll cut more into the deeper part of the run, because that's what you want to do. So these are the sorts of things that make us very different. But the one thing that is crucial for us is, and this is the difference between, I think, Glengoyne and a lot of other distilleries, it's about the temperatures of distillation. It's how you heat those stills up. So you can have a still set up that's really, really, you would look at it and you go, well, that might be a lighter style. And you would look at Glengoyne's and go, that might create a lighter style. But if you just whack the temperatures on and push it through the system really, really quickly, you're not going to get the full benefit of that. So that's a really interesting point. So, there's Arthur there.
Yeah, it was Arthur who was showing us around.
Yeah, Arthur's 78 and just loves touring people around. He's brilliant. He's fabulous. Yeah, and you can see the setup there. So, the temperatures of how you distill is quite important as well. So we're very slowly distilled because we don't heat the stills up too much, just to the boiling point of alcohol, pretty much. So, which is about 170 something Fahrenheit. I can only know it in centigrade, but 83.6, 82.6, I think it is, 82, something like that. Anyway, 78 point, I can't remember what it is. I can't believe it. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, the point is, it's all about really understanding the point of how hot you heat those stills up. So, that gives us a spirit, and then we produce our 15-year-old for putting it into bourbon and sherry casks. And this is our new 15. This is nothing like the old 15. If anybody's had the old 15, quite different to the old 15. This is the new 15. So let's have a little try of it. 78.3, I think it is. There you go. It's quite late. So, Glengoyne style, what do we get from that spirit, though? I can talk about slow distillation and things like that, but I mean, I love an Islay whiskey. I worked for Bowmore, but when you smell an Islay whiskey, the first thing you smell generally is peat smoke. You get that phenolic smoke element. We have none of that. We don't use any peat in our barley. It's just hot air. So we're looking for fruitiness. So our clear wort, our fermentation is all driven towards deriving fruit in the spirit. And then the slow distillation further enhances that and gives us this beautiful spirit, which we then put into Oloroso sherry casks and bourbon casks. And that's how we make this 15-year-old. So let's have a little nose. 76.67. Thanks, Jeff. I couldn't remember.
Jeff is our fact checker extraordinaire.
Okay.
He usually is able to pull up and verify things that we say faster than we can. So.
Good. I might need him. It's quite late. But yeah, no, this is gorgeous. So what I love about this is if you look at the 15, you've got bourbon cask. So when we mature that spirit in bourbon cask, we get this sort of very obviously as hints of vanilla, but you get this absolutely beautiful sort of lighter side of Glengoyne. And then we've got the sherry casks in here, which brings that richer, darker side. So you can see 20% first fill bourbon, 25% first fill sherry, and the rest are refills, which are casks that we've used before, but crucial to also showcasing that spirit that's changed over those 15 years. And this is what we get. Gorgeous.
Yeah. Very fruity on the nose, very approachable, lovely palate, nice mouthfeel.
Yeah. No, it's just very smooth. What I mean by smooth, it just goes down very, very gently and very, very beautifully. And I think you get that slight sweetness at the front from the first fill bourbon then it almost the sort of sherry comes in a little bit later. But it just has this beautiful mouthfeel that I love. It's a fabulous, fabulous example of Glengoyne. But as we tend to go older, and we're going to see that in the 18 that we'll try, we're increasing the amount of sherry casks, and in our 21 and 25 and 30, they're all European oak sherry casks. So. But yeah, it's a great. We're very happy with this, and when we basically relaunched this, or launched it probably about 6 months ago, something like that. And we were very clear to say this is not the return of the 15, because it's not the same 15-year-old as it was before. And it's got more sherry cask in it, but it is for me it's got a real bit of both sides of what I've been talking about there. Love it, absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's got a nice mouthfeel. I've been waiting to post this until I could get it to actually load properly, but there is the chap, very affable fellow.
He is.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about Art, he's fabulous, and he speaks fluent German. So when there's a German group in, he's our man. So he speaks fluent German. I think he's nearly 80 now, and he's just loves it. He loves taking people around the distillery, which is great.
And Gordon, can I just point out something quickly before we move on? The hill in behind you that rises above the distillery was not, that was a famous lookout for like the taxman, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So yeah, it's Glengoyne Hill, and you can walk up there. It's about a 25-minute walk up from behind the distillery, and have a dram at the top, and you get a lovely view. But yeah, I mean, Glengoyne's situated where it was because it's a very small glen. If you think of Glenfiddich or Glenlivet, these are big glens in Speyside. This is a very small glen. We can't be any bigger. A glen is just a valley. It's literally more than a tiny little valley. Obviously hidden away. It was a farm originally, and there was possibly a bit of illicit distilling going on in the hills nearby. And then they decided to go legal in 1823 when everybody else did. It was originally formed in 1833. But yeah, it was always. But the major thing that made Glengoyne really, really unique was its accessibility to Glasgow compared to everywhere else. And getting the product from the distillery to Glasgow was, I mean, some of the stories that we found out about how, a lot of the wives were carrying it under their dresses, walking through the woods to get the whiskey to the bars in Glasgow and all this type of thing. I mean, it's amazing stories, and that's why it's not ever had any peat in it, because it's always been on a train line not far from Glasgow. So the use of coal and everything else other than peat was very much the sort of main reason why it was never a peated whiskey. And if you look at a map of Scotland, it's generally, historically, not now, all the distilleries on the outside that use peat, obviously. But you can make, I don't know what you think, guys, but I think regionality in Scotch is pretty much dead now. I really do.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm sure Kurt and Harmony can chime in as well. I mean, it's something I like joking about. Kurt?
Yeah, 1,000% right, Gordon. I think we talk to people in the shop about this a lot. I think everybody's sort of just hedging their bets against, another 80s crash kind of thing. You've got a warehouse full of stuff of all different styles. You're probably a little less likely to be redundant and shut down, right?
Yeah, and I actually said it too. We had a very serious global travel retail, which are there's sort of it's a bit more of a thing over here, but World Duty Free, which is, if you ever go through Heathrow, that's World Duty Free that you see there, and they still do all theirs by regions, and I'm just like, that doesn't really tell the consumer anything apart from, unless you have a map and you're showing you where the geography of the place is, it doesn't tell you anything about the whiskey anymore. So don't drink regions, just drink great whiskey. There's a bit of a tip for you.
Yeah.
And I just, I was speaking to somebody recently who says, I only drink Speyside. And I'm like, well, you're missing out, my friend. You know, there's some great Speyside whiskies, but just drink great whiskies. But yeah, I mean, this is a great whiskey, one to have in your locker. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
What do you think, guys? Anybody out there?
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you haven't been on one of our tastings before, feel free to throw your comments, tasting notes in the chat. Kurt and Harmony, both of you guys have the unmute power, so I'll let you guys chime in on that Glengoyne 15.
Harmony?
Yeah, I like it. It's a nice nose, and the palate is lots of fruit, and I love that that lingering spice that comes in, almost like cinnamon and other spices, I suppose. But for me, I'm getting a lot of cinnamon.
Yeah, there is a bit of that. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
but not overpowering. Just gentle,
No.
little waves of it come through.
Yeah,
This is 43% as well, natural color. So every product that you're going to taste tonight is natural color. For us, that's really, really important because we buy some of the finest sherry casks in the industry. And as we go through the evening, I'll explain how that has occurred, but it's really as a result of us purchasing the distilleries that we're drinking tonight and where they came from. But, you know, what's very, very interesting is if we look at the history of Ian MacLeod, it wasn't called Ian MacLeod originally, that came in the 60s, but the business has been around since 1933, family-run business by the Russell family. And for 70 years, they weren't whiskey producers, but they were in the industry. So what were they doing? Well, they were brokers. So they were the guys who were saying to the Highland and the Lowlands and the Speyside distillers, so I've got a customer over here wants to make a blend. I need some of these whiskies, and they want to exchange. And they were the guys in the middle. Huge part of the business. And then really their big sort of breakthrough, as it were, was to start making whiskies for supermarkets in the UK. So Sainsbury's they started to make single malt for Sainsbury's in the 70s. And remember, single malt was pretty unheard of back then as a category, as it is, you know, that's changed so much now. And I think the latest figures are something like 15 or 16% of volume now is single malt or something. And the rest is blends, predominantly, obviously, mainly blends. But by value now, single malt's huge. So the single malt's really developed as a category on its own, obviously. But back then it wasn't. So selling single malt in a supermarket in the 70s was like, that's a bit weird. But it just sort of shows you where it's come from now. So yeah, no, that was the breakthrough. And then even then, they were bottlers, they were blenders, they were everything. But they never had any of their own whiskey until they basically bought Glengoyne in '03. So that's how the business developed. So yeah, family-run business. So yeah, it was a very interesting sort of business sort of pathway that it came on. And that sort of leads us nicely into the next whiskey, actually, which is the Legacy. So we've done 3 releases of this whiskey, and certainly what we found is that each of them have hit a different spot for people. So in a very simple way, why did we produce a Legacy series? Well, it was all about producing a whiskey that really showcased the people that we're all about, you know, who we were highlighting. So the first one was a heavily sherried whiskey, and it really celebrated the distiller at the end of the 1800s who started to fill sherry casks, and our second whiskey was much more bourbon forward. It was more about celebrating the inclusion of using different types of casks. And that was really to celebrate Peter Russell, who was the chairman of the business. Unfortunately, he died probably about a month and a half ago. He was 96, I think he was, but he was still the chairman. So Leonard's father, the chairman of the business. But he was a real pioneer and totally took this business to another level. And so that was much more a bourbon forward Glengoyne, which was really interesting. This one takes us a little bit more back into the realms of the 15, but it's a younger whiskey, but it's got higher strength. So it's 48. So this is all about Arthur John Tedder. This is all about, he was the duty the taxman based at Glengoyne, but actually became really influential in the world of whiskey in terms of the rules of single malt whiskey, from the size of casks to the use of copper pot stills, etc., etc. He became a really important, integral part of the overall rules of Scotch whiskey. So we were celebrating him with this third release. So this is got a slightly different cask makeup, but it's bourbon and it's sherry cask. It's working on a formula that we do. And at Glengoyne, we use basically 3 types of casks. We use bourbon casks, we use American oak sherry casks, and we use European oak sherry casks. Those are the 3 types of casks we use. Everything is fully matured all the way. So when you see or hear of 15 years old, everything in that bottle has been matured for 15 years and then married together at the end. So it's not been moved or finished. We do a finish of one whiskey, but it's everything is fully matured, and that's always the way we've done it. It's not to say that finished whiskies aren't great; they're just different. For they produce a different, I think, experience. So 48%. I love this because I've got this real tropical element coming through for me on this whiskey. I like the additional strength. A lot of people say to me, why is Glengoyne not at 46%? And I'm like, it's a very valid question. And it comes down to quite a lot of things. But one of the things is actually at 43, it's fabulous. A lot of them. But, if we could do it at 46, we'd love to do it. But the step change for us in terms of volume and would be so difficult to do. It would be really hard to do that. So we have, maybe in the future, ideally we'd love to do that, but we are where we are at the moment. But I think the 15 shows you at 43 how good it is.
Mhm.
And it is a naturally presented product. So, but this is beautiful. There's a little bit more of that. I think, I don't know. I find it quite hard, but I get a little bit of sort of tinned pineapple on this a little bit. It's a little lighter profile, but it's literally a combination of those bourbon sherry casks, American oak, European oak, and bourbon casks all together, and refill, of course. But yeah, whiskey that was a small amount, 48, but at 48%, really, I think, really shows you that, and you'll see this in the cask strength. Glengoyne doesn't need a lot of water. I don't think. It's pretty, it's pretty great the way it is. And even when we get onto the cask strength, it's 59% I don't add water to it. But if you do, you see that change. So it's this is a great whiskey. It's gone really, really well. The whole range has gone very, very well, and the diversity between them people have loved. So, but people have their favorites. Some people go, oh, the first one, lots of sherry, loved it. Actually, love the second one. It was a bit fresher, a bit lighter. This is somewhere in the middle of the two, I think is probably fair to say.
Mhm.
What do you
Yeah.
think, guys?
This one definitely packs a bit more of a punch.
Mhm.
It starts out to me like the 15 finishes, like with those spices all up front. Definitely more tropical, but I get the cinnamon right away.
Yeah.
And then it just carries on kind of more sherry cask, more raisins, more spice, little toasty notes, and definitely a little boozy, which is nice.
It's always good.
Yeah.
It's always good. But, and it's with our when we developed these products, it was all about we want to do it at 48, but we also want to produce them quite different and get people to really have a favorite out of the 3 and have all 3. And they've really people have gone, when's the 4th one coming? Well, there's not going to be a 4th one. It was only ever 3. And it was never brought in as a replacement, because we lost the 15 3.5 years ago. And we brought this product out not as a replacement at all, but just to fill a space in the range. And they've been so popular. People are like, can we have some more? Can you do a 4th one? Can you do a 5th one? Can you do a 6th one? Well, we will have some new products coming, and we'll be over there telling you about them whenever I can get back over there at some point. But we're going to have some nice products in different styles of casks in the next few years. Some interesting stuff coming out of Glengoyne in the next few years, I can tell you.
Mhm. Well,
Nice.
yeah, I'm really digging this one too. It's a bit more spirit driven than a lot of the Glengoynes we get to see. I
Yeah.
love the fact that there's still some barley in there. You can tell it's at least partially a little on the young side, but there's some
Yeah.
nice character there.
Yeah, it's in just answering the question there, it's about we don't do anything really. We don't really do anything under sort of 10. So it's this, you know, I think the key thing, a lot of people who, and I think this has changed, but 5 to 10 years ago, I think a lot of people were quite skeptical of NAS. You know, they were like, oh, NAS, is that just like a 3-year-old with caramel in it? Some of them were, to be honest, but now I think what we've shown as an industry in a general sense is that NAS whiskies can be really good as well. It just takes you out that conformity of 15, 18, 12, and allows you to go, well, I want to use these casks. It allows the blenders to go a bit freestyle, which is good. And that's why this range has been so popular. But yeah, it's good. It's got a little bit of strength to it, but it's not, you know, it's not overtly, you know, there's still good structure to this whiskey. It's really good. So it's to answer the question, what approximate age? Somewhere between 10 and 12 in an average sense. What do people think? Anybody got a comment?
Yeah, I'm so that profile is, to me, it's a bigger, soupier profile than the first one. First one, the delicacy there kind of just has my heart a little bit more than this one, I think.
No, it's great. It's really, really good. We were really happy with how this range has gone. And I think the you know, the interest around the world with the legacy series means that we're going to come up with something that sort of fits in the same area. So we'll see how we progress that. But our problem is we're just to give you an indication of the size. When we took over 20 years ago, I think it was 1 million liters. So give you a context of size, and there's probably other people slightly further up to speed on current sizes of whiskey distilleries, but I think Glenlivet is about 23 million liters at the moment. And when they do their next expansion, that'll take them to pretty much 30 million liters. We're one at Glengoyne. So, and of that 1 million, up until probably 10 years ago, more than 50% of that, 60, 70 was going to blends. So we've managed to change that around. But of course, when you buy a distillery, you have ongoing commitments to the customers that, you know, that were being supplied the spirit before. So you have to continue with that. So you know, there's long-standing relationships that you have to honor, which benefits you in other parts of the industry. So, but we're now slowly getting to a point that we're up at 80 or 90% now. Glengoyne is going for our single malt, which is great. So, but I mean, in the context of, you know, these other bigger distilleries, we're really a very different Glen. We're a very small Glen. That's why we do it the way we do it. But yeah, I mean, in the new Macallan distilleries, I think 16 million liters, something like that. And so there's a lot of big distilleries in Scotland now, and even Tamdhu at 4 million, you know, 10, 15 years ago would have been considered a big distillery. It's now, you know, small, medium sized, you know. It's just sort of shows you how the power of what, you know, what's going on in the industry at the moment, which is why the price of casks are so high. Everything in barley is high, just from that perspective, but also from the perspective of what's been going on in the world as well, as we're all seeing with inflation.
Yeah. Cool. Shall we talk about something that's not going to be available for a while?
Yes, why don't we do that? Let's talk about the next whiskey. So it's so rare, I've only got an old bottle of it. So there we go. We're going to drink the 18. So a bit like, so if we do a little bit of maths, we bought the distillery in 2003. And I've just said back then that the, you know, there wasn't a lot of whiskey coming forward to single malt. And so that really is one of the major reasons why the 18-year-old and is going to have to disappear, I'm afraid, for a few years, because we just can't make it. So we have to, people love the 18, but we have to move it to one side and just have to put it on hold until we can make it in a way that makes it, it can be made consistently and as good as it is and has been. So yeah, we're not going to see a lot of 18-year-old in the next few years. And it's just down to what I've just told you about how we took over the distillery. We just don't have the stocks at that age. And that's what happens with small distilleries. And, other distilleries have done it. We've just had to do it. I love the 18. I absolutely love it. But, that's why I've got a case of it. I'll be okay. But it's a beautiful distillery. So a product. So the 18 for me just takes us to the edge of full sherry cask maturation. No bourbon cask in here. What you get in here is 50% first fill of European and American oak sherry casks. Now, Charlie McLean summed this up beautifully. And he also said the way I described it is quite a good way of thinking about it. If you fully mature in whiskey, fully mature in a cask, what was in the cask before is less relevant by quite a long way. The oak type is the most important thing. So if you look at how you mature a whiskey and you use natural color, then if we use European oak Oloroso sherry cask, it's very dark, quite a dark color. I'm going to show you that with these two Tamdhus because it's a similar thing, similar casks at Tamdhu. I'm going to hold these up and we'll talk about this again, but these two whiskies are the same age and the same strength. That is European oak and that is American oak sherry casks. So they go through the same process in Jerez. They're made in a 6-year process, but the oaks are different, and that's what drives the color. So when we produce natural colored products and you see the color of the casks, what the whiskies can produce, then what you're tasting is the wood influence, not the fact that there was Oloroso in it 18 or 20 years ago. That's really, really important to understand. So oak type is crucial to what we talk about at Glengoyne and Tamdhu because we don't finish, we're fully maturing. And that's a really thing to remember. So this 18 is a great combination of Glengoyne's version of these married together with refill casks, which are bringing out that even more evolved spirit style because we're getting to 18 years old. So there's probably a third of the cask, maybe a third of the cask, 25% has disappeared to the angels. And you're getting less interaction from the casks. So you're getting more oxidative impact on the whiskey. So this 18, I think you start to see that. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was in Austria about 5 years ago and I met a guy called Wolfgang. He was a bit over refreshed, let's put it that way, when I spoke to him. And he had a beard that makes Andrews look non-existent. He looked like Father Christmas. I mean, really. And when I spoke to him, he'd been at the show for a while. And I know him quite well. He had half his lunch in his beard as well. And he was
Classy.
yeah, and when you go to these sort of whiskey shows and his glass was like pretty cloudy and you're like, oh dear, I need a new glass. Anyway, he says, Gordon, I want to speak to you about I put in my best Austrian accent, speak to you about the Glengoyne 18. He says, I've been thinking about it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, I know exactly what it tastes like. And I'm like, is this going to be good or bad? And he goes, it's basically a liquid apple strudel. And I know what he means. It's red apples, it's cooked fruits, it's cinnamon, it's pastry. All of that is in this whiskey. There's a little hint of raisins in there, and it's a fabulous whiskey. This.
He didn't spittle the strudel at you, did he?
I think some of it ended him, and it's covered. I have to wear goggles the next day. But yeah, no, he was a nice guy. But he was like, and ever since he said that, it's the best, or one of the best ways for me of describing this whiskey. There's a bit of brown sugar in there. There's a little bit of there's for sure there's cinnamon, but there's also like the apples in the 10 and the 12 at the younger end of Glengoyne are very green because that's the spirit characteristic. Here they're red. They're red apples. And I just get that sort of red stewed apples. And this is just literally, as I said, it's like a liquid apple strudel. It is just fabulous. The sort of brown sugar notes, but there's a real depth to this whiskey as well. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, that makes me happy because apple strudel was my first note. Like the more I had to put a word to it, I put in the thing. It tastes like a strudel.
It does. It absolutely. And Wolfgang, he's absolutely right. And it's sad it's not going to be around for a couple of years, but yeah, it's an absolute belter, and it's a really good example of. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, I like single malts at 15 and 18. That's the sweet spot for single malt." No, I don't agree with that. I think it's totally up to the individual. But for me, it's a great balance of age, good casks, full maturation, spirit, and how that spirit's changed over the 18 years or actually 20 years that it's been. It's actually a 20-year-old, by the way, pretty much, everybody, just to let you know.
Hey, Gordon,
yeah.
next time you see Wolfgang, give him my whiskey festival tip, which is every time I have a whiskey, I rinse my glass with water and I drink it. It has the dual effect of not having a cloudy glass that looks disgusting to whomever's pouring whiskey into it, but it also keeps you hydrated. So
yeah, I might suggest that to him. Actually, I think at one point I did see him later on in the day, and I was like, I'm not pouring one of our whiskeys in your glass. It's a disgrace.
yeah.
I don't know what disgusts me more, emptying wine spit buckets, or when you're at a festival pouring into somebody's glass when there's chunks of food.
No, it's horrible. It's horrible. No, it's horrible. But he was a good man. He was a good guy. And his description has always stayed with me because it just sort of sums it up about as well as you can for that whiskey.
Yeah. And say what you will, the Germanic peoples take their whiskey very seriously. So.
Oh, they do. Yeah, they do. They do. I mean, there's probably, just to give you an idea, I've got a small team of ambassadors that do events, and we could be at an event literally in Switzerland, Austria, Germany, and Holland every weekend. In fact, every weekend for the whole year. They in fact, you could probably go to an event in Germany every weekend. So yeah, they love it, and they take it pretty seriously. Yeah, they're just to come up with that, I was like, you've absolutely nailed it. And it's that beautiful. So when you look at European oak, you look at this richer, thicker style of whiskey, you're getting the raisins and the dark chocolate, and when you then blend that with this, which is American oak. With American oak, you get a bit more of those stewed fruits, a bit more vanillas, because the oak's got vanillin in it. It's the same oak that's used in a bourbon cask, but the oak comes from America to Spain, gets dried, gets made into cask, gets sherry put in it in a 6-year process. So there's obvious characteristics from the wood perspective only with a bourbon cask, but that comes through when you toast it and then put sherry in it. You get those vanillins coming out. So in a very simple way, we have a great display at Glengoyne, but we would have European oak at one end, American oak, and then a bourbon cask would sit here, a little bit lighter color, lighter flavors, and all that type of sort of, in a very simple way. That's quite a generic way of looking at a cask colors and cask flavors. But yeah, I mean, but that's only relevant if your whiskey's natural colored. So we are very lucky that we are naturally colored whiskey. It's something we pride ourselves on. What do you think of the 18, guys? Anybody out there? Anybody want to chat?
Oh, Harmony disappeared. Kurt, why don't you go?
Yeah, this one, I think Andrew probably has led me to this place, but I think he's got a little bit of a soft spot for this one. He's been pushing it pretty hard for quite some time in the shop. And the more I revisit it, the more I'm. So I'll be honest with you, Gordon. There's people that come into the shop now and they'll say, "Hey, do you guys have Macallan?" I'm like, "Wow, you pronounced it wrong. It's Glengoyne. It's right up here." We lead people to Tamdhu, to Glengoyne, as you know. For a while there, it looked like Glendronach was going to be the heirs to the throne behind Macallan when Macallan started to do their thing. Glendronach, of course, with Billy's Exodus, I think he probably absolutely took everything of value out of those warehouses, and whatever's left, that's what is making its way around now. No,
he did all right. He did all right out of it as well.
He did. But you guys seem to have the best sherry barrels on the market at this point. It's uniformly, consistently good across the whole range. And as you step up in terms of years, there's a delicacy at the same time that goes with those sort of monolithic flavors that grow with a lot of sherry. It's a really cool balance you guys have.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you a little bit about the provenance of the cask. I was hinting at it earlier. We bought Glengoyne 20 years ago. We bought it from Edrington. So you buy a 21-year-old Glengoyne at the moment. It's not from a cask we bought. It's from a cask Macallan bought. And that applies to Tamdhu as well, which we bought about 12 years ago. And so we'll come on to Tamdhu when we speak about Tamdhu, but from Glengoyne's perspective, it would be, I mean, we actually sat within the Edrington Group's wood buying policy for the first 10 or 15 years of our ownership of it. We were in the same deal with them. We worked with them on our cask policy. Now, whatever your thoughts on Macallan or I'm a big Highland Park fan, but I've also personally seen, I think, the quality of Highland Park go up and down quite a lot in the last few years. And Andrew says down. I drank, I mean, probably 12, 15 years ago, Highland Park 18 was to die for. It's not the same now, in my opinion, but that's not everybody's opinion. But the point is with casks is, if you want to produce a 21 or an 18 that's as good as this, why would you not buy the same cask, and why would you not understand how the spirit was produced and not change that, if you know what I mean? I think that's the really important aspect. And when you come to being a prospective buyer of a distillery, they don't want you to do, they don't want you to do completely mad things and change it completely, because there's a huge legacy to a whiskey as well. So you're really the custodian of that distillery. You are the owner, but you can't start, ripping out all the stills, putting in 25, that's not what it was about. And I think that's why we're quite respected in this industry. And that's one of the reasons why we managed to get Rosebank from Diageo, but we can come back to that. But certainly when you go to Jerez and you go to the bodegas that are producing the sherry for the whiskey industry, and we're seasoning it for 24 months plus, that is the longest in the industry. And that comes as a result of who we get our casks from, which is the same suppliers as the Edrington brands, Macallan and things like that. So, but it's also what you do with them as well and how you blend them.
Well, and Gordon, that's only part of the story, because Macallan has grown so much, the brand, that they can't continue to keep buying entirely the type of casks they had previously. And I know this because I got invited by them about 5 or 6 years ago to go down to Jerez, visit their bodegas, visit the what do you call it, the tonelerias or whatever they're called, where they make
the cooperages.
Yeah, and the sad thing is most Macallan casks have sherry in them for 6 months, and it's because their perceived demand is such that they have to turn them over so quickly that they're not what they used to be. And I think what you're not saying, and maybe you don't want to say because you're a gentleman and whatnot, I know you've been accused of worse, is that the difference is that you guys are continuing to source and use the cask the way you did, whereas they've looked at it and they've gone in a different direction. And I think that's the major difference. And as much as it's visible in Glengoyne, especially the 25 and the 30, I think it's even more impactful in what you do at Tamdhu, because I think Tamdhu even more so is that old school sherry style that, with the exception of a handful of others and Gordon MacPhail, no one else has whiskeys like that anymore. So
No, I think that's true. No, I think that's true. Look, we do stick rigidly to, you know, what because we are a quality. We come from a small producing background, so Macallan's a victim of its own success, of course, and or not, depending on your own view. I'm trying to be. I respect Macallan because of what they've done for this industry. But I mean, you know, given the choice, most people now would go, you want to make, you know, there's other products out there that people want to add into their inventory. So if you drink Macallan, it's a great whiskey, but there's plenty of other things that you should be trying too, for sure.
Gordon, once again, you're a gentleman, me less so. Macallan, like, it's a very successful brand, hats off to them. The distillery they've built is like a soulless monument to their ego. And I think anyone who walks through it and then goes and walks through a place like Glengoyne or even Glenfiddich, which is a big distillery, you're going to notice a huge difference. One of them is purely about the brand. There's no heart there. And, you know, there's a heart with most distilleries still, including some big ones like Glenfiddich. But you go to Macallan, there is no heart. It is just a giant subterranean spaceship with no soul.
It looks like a Bond lair.
Yeah,
I mean, like, it's a mighty impressive building, and you're like, wow.
absolutely.
But you don't get, for me, there's not the smells or the, you know, the interaction or the warehouses or any of all of that.
Sterile. It's sterile.
Anyway, enough of
Glengoyne
them.
Cask Strength.
Sorry?
I said Glengoyne Cask Strength.
Yeah, so we'll move on to Glengoyne Cask Strength. So we've done a lot of, I think you're on, I think it's 9, is it, that you're on? Is that right? Cask Strength number 9?
Yes.
C, yes.
C, good. I'm just trying to think which one I've got here. I've got 9, good. So yeah, Glengoyne Cask Strength, this is the 9th edition of the Cask Strength series. And I think what's really interesting about this is, and this is what I love about it, some Cask Strength whiskies for me are brilliant because they can do so much more for you, the consumer. And what I mean by that is, you want to make a cocktail, great, use a Cask Strength at home. If you want to have a strong whiskey because you've had not a great day, you know, then a Cask Strength's going to do that, you know. But it's got to deliver on taste. It's not about, some Cask Strengths you have are quite spirity, and they're not matured enough, and they're a little bit rough around the edges, and the water jug is nearby, so you can just try and take the edge off it a little bit. You don't need to do that with this whiskey, because of the casks and because the spirit is so. If you ever drink Glengoyne spirit, it's fat. You know, you can drink it. Not many distilleries' spirits are as good as Glengoyne's from a perspective of nosing and tasting. You know, again, this is a combination of casks. You can see that it's pretty much, you know, Oloroso and, you know, only a little bit of bourbon casks in here. So there's a nice richness to this, but it's not overpowering. Don't be afraid of 59.6%. I mean, if it was 0.5% stronger, it'd be illegal to take it to Norway on a plane. I think it's almost illegal to put it on a plane at 60. Technically, I think. Yeah. Which they don't check for, which is quite interesting. Anyway, 59.6. This is batch 9. They've all been different. One or two of them were all sherry casks. One or two of them been really bourbon forward. And again, this gives us that bit like the legacy, the variation to produce something a little bit different. So let's have a little try of this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, 1 in the morning. Cheers.
Yeah.
Oh, but I mean, you know, you nose it and you don't go, oh, it doesn't nose of 59.6. It noses of like 52, you know? And
Gordon,
it's
not just the strength, but I think profile wise, I can see why you wanted to do this towards the end.
Yeah.
Because I think that prominence of the sherry is coming out a little bit more in this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the ratio, but also I think at Cask Strength, you're just getting more of a concentration of it.
Yeah, you are. And look, you know, the one thing to try is if you are finding this a little bit strong, the thing is it's not spirity strong, it's flavor strong. There's intensity here. Yes, it's strong. There's no doubt it's strong. If you add 1 or 2 drops of water, you will see how this will change. It will be quite different with a couple of drops of water. If you want to see how that will change, you will see a big difference, because you know all the other whiskies tonight we've already added water to. So you know we our 15-year-old would have been about 55%, 54%. We've reduced it. Our 18 was probably 53. I'm guessing somewhere around that level. We've reduced it. Legacy, we've reduced it. This we haven't. This is, so how do you get cask strength from more than one cask? Well, it's bringing all the casks together, and it's the average strength of those casks when you bring them together. Nothing else added. So the combination of the casks that have been brought are the best examples that John, who's our master blender, has identified of Glengoyne at cask strength. Now, what he's quite interesting about what John says is, he also says that if you come across a cask that maybe has a slight off note, depending on where that off note hits his nose and the nosing panel. So sometimes you'll have a whiskey that at 60% has an off note, but it doesn't have it at 40 and it doesn't have it at 20. Other casks are fine at this level, have more at lower levels. And that's because water changes the way whiskey is, and certain elements of a whiskey become stronger and become less. And it's quite an interesting way of looking at it. Sulfury casks is something we hear of in the industry quite a lot. Some people pick up sulfur, some people don't pick up sulfur at all. But actually, if you're using a cask that has a hint of sulfur in it in a blend of whiskies, for something like this, actually it can be overall beneficial. But on its own, you'd never make that a single cask because people go that sulfury. And that's the art of blending. It's very interesting. But I remember speaking to Dave Broom about it, who's my whiskey god. I mean, I think he's just whiskey god to me. I was very lucky to work with Michael Jackson and Dave Broom. And Dave said, when I do awards, I trace so much whiskey that, you know, I actually drink most of it at 20% or 25%. I'm adding a lot of water because I'm taking the alcohol out. I want to hit the flavor. If he's trying to get a real tasting note for a whiskey, or he will taste it as bottled and then reduce it with a significant amount of water. But he's not trying to enjoy it like we are. He's trying to get a full understanding of that whiskey. So when you reduce a whiskey to, you know, if you've got a 40% whiskey, reduce it to 20, it could be very, very different because you're not tasting the alcohol, but your other flavors will be stronger at that lower level. It's quite interesting. It's very interesting. What do we think of this?
This one, and
Looks gorgeous.
we're gonna, yeah, the last two in each range, you know, Tamdhu, Glengoyne here, are. It sounds like we're picking on other people to build ourselves up here, but where we used to lead people to Abuna, we're now taking them to these two whiskeys. Abuna's kind of turned into an aggressive sort of young spice bomb. These ones are still carrying a bit of that jamminess that we're looking for. So these are rock stars as far as I'm concerned.
And I think this was there not a deal on your website there? I mean, it's an amazing value for the whiskey, I think.
Amazing deal. Yeah, it's temporarily on sale because we got a deal on it. So.
Oh, did you? Right, I'll have a word with them. I'm joking.
Oh, you know what, Gordon, I'm pretty transparent on this stuff. If we get a good deal on something, we pass it on.
I know.
How we roll. But yeah, no, it's very good value. The whiskey's good quality. This is incredibly good bang for your buck. You know, again, Kurt, like another good example would be a couple of years ago, the Glengoyne Cask or the Glendronach Cask Strengths that we used to get. 3, 4, 5 years ago. This is something that kind of fits into that profile and style, value, but also quality.
Yeah. Alex sums it up beautifully in the chat, Alex. Fantastic deal. I like it's a flavor explosion, not a spirit hot thing. And that's because some cask strengths can be that. And you're like, oh, it's quite spirit hot, but it's flavor intense, I think, for me.
Mhm, mhm.
And if you added water, if anybody did add water, I hope you saw how much it changed the whiskey.
Yeah,
Yeah, and-
I added a bit to mine, and it took it reasonably well, which is not something I always find.
Yeah, some whiskeys fall apart when you add water to them.
Mhm.
But this just changes, becomes a little bit sweeter, possibly a little bit creamier sometimes. But yeah, fabulous whiskey. Great one to finish on. Had to put this at the end because it's the strongest by 11.6%.
Right. And yet we're still only halfway there.
I know, crikey, absolutely. Lucky I'm not doing much tomorrow morning. But yeah, no, any questions from anybody about Glengoyne? I've sort of, I'd say I've rattled through it, but I've been banging on for an hour, so sorry.
Do you spend a lot of time at the distillery, Gordon, or are you kind of all over the place?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm probably there once a week. We've got a lot of people coming, you know, sort of guests of ours inbound coming, so I'm there a lot for there. Probably in the, yeah, and it's a 25-minute drive from where I'm sitting at the moment, so it's not far away. So yeah, it's a great place to spend some time because they are. It's a busy distillery. You know, before COVID, it was, I think in about 2018, it was the busiest distillery in Scotland. And if you've seen the size of it, it's quite incredible to get 90,000 people through that distillery in a year. That's amazing. And with a TripAdvisor of 4.8% or 4.8 out of 5. So amazing. But the people are why it's fabulous to visit. And you've said it yourselves. You know, Andrew said it. You know, the people are great. And so, you know, I literally, if I ever go there and there's people doing tours, I don't go on tour with them because they just get it, you know. But I'll do a wee tasting with them and things like that. But I'm there quite a lot because I'm involved in what we're doing with Brown Homes. But yeah, it's a great distillery to visit. So if you're ever coming to Scotland, put it on the list.
All right.
I got to get there, and I haven't spoken to Andrew yet, but I did find I have a bit of window between classes here at the tail end of mid-April to very, very early May.
All
So
right.
I might try to come see you.
Mid-April to early May.
Yeah.
Spirit of Speyside Whiskey Festival, Kurt's on at the end of April.
I've got a long program starting here, I think on the 5th of September, so I'd have to be back before that. So I'd probably miss it, unfortunately.
Okay. Just a quick question. How old is the distillery? 1833. It was founded, Burnfoot Farm, and it became Glengoyne, which is Valley of the Wild Geese, hence the goose, obviously, on the label. In about the 1860s or 70s. So, yeah, it's not the oldest distillery. Anybody know the oldest distillery in Scotland?
That's a contentious point, Gordon.
I know.
I don't think there's agreement on it. I personally believe that it's Strathisla, with a footnote being that it could potentially be Glenfarclas. So,
well, I think it's Glengarry, but officially it's Glenturret.
I know, but I actually think Strathisla is older than Glenturret.
Okay.
There seems to be some proof, and there's a painting of Reichlocken Farm, which used to be the old name for Glenfarclas, from it's either the 60s or 70s, that it shows a farm with a smokestack and barrels lying around it, which looks an awful lot like a distillery. So yeah, that's the one that I kind of hope is the oldest, but Glengarry would be cool. I'd respect that. That's a great little distillery.
Yeah, it's a great little distillery. But yeah, no, there's people think it is it's contentious, but I think officially at the moment it's Glenturret. So
that's the one. And I will say, just while we're on this subject, I hate it when people suggest that Bushmills is the oldest distillery in the world. That's just some clever marketing bullshit. But we won't go down that road right now.
No. It's very good marketing bullshit, but yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. It's does it matter? Really? No. I mean, it's a nice story, but what you know, I used to work for Bowmore. It's the second oldest distillery in Scotland, apparently, but the oldest on Islay. But it makes great whiskey. So,
And
you
yet,
know,
Gordon, you've spent time on Islay. There's people on Islay who would argue with that point.
that is very true. That is very true.
Um,
So you can't win anyway.
you really can't. Gordon, if you want to tee up Tamdhu, I was trying to find
Yeah.
photos of Tamdhu here, and I couldn't find them anywhere on my computer, but I found them on my Instagram page. So
I
I've
have
actually
some
got,
of you. Okay.
I've got some photos of when Evan and I were there in 2019.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that gentleman in the middle is Sandy McIntyre. He is the distillery manager. So the first thing to understand about Tamdhu is we've owned it since 2011, but you can't visit it there's no visitor center. I say it's a proper working distillery. Most distilleries are, but it's not, you cannot book a tour. So we're only open for 2 days over the Spirit of Speyside Whiskey Festival, where we do some tours. So it's a workhorse distillery, as you say there. It's not beautiful where Glengoyne is beautiful. I'm afraid Tamdhu's not so beautiful, but ultimately it makes fabulous whiskey. But it's all the other thing that's very different between the two of them. And you can see this is probably during a shutdown, so you can see everything's
A lot of refurbishment was taking place at the time.
Yeah. And so most distilleries shut down for about probably a month and a half in a year, to maybe not as much, but a month a year, so they can do work generally around Christmas and during the summer. But Tamdhu is a big distillery, 4 million litres. We bought it in 2011, as I said, from Edrington. So it was their distillery as well. We bought it for an absolute snip. And there's a beautiful indication of what I was just saying to you about colour. That one in the middle is European oak. The one on the left is American oak sherry casks. And the Tamdhu 15, which you're going to taste, is a combination of both of them and refill casks. So that just shows you how we focus on the quality of what we get from the casks. And so we really talk a lot about our sherry cask because that's what we're known for. That's all we do at Tamdhu is Oloroso sherry casks. Now, I don't think, and I bet you if there's anybody who would disagree with this, would be either Andrew or Kurt, I don't think there's another distillery in Scotland that fully matures from start to finish only in Oloroso sherry casks 100% of the time.
Yeah, the only company that would come close, and they're not even doing a lot of it, would be Gordon MacPhail, which over the years, and they're not a distillery, has finished a shockingly high amount of stuff in sherry, matured full term.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. I don't think. I mean, Glenfarclas would probably be close because they don't finish. Like they never finish.
So they don't always use sherry either, though.
It's true. Although
they've got slightly more whiskies than us.
What's that?
They've got a slightly bigger range in terms of their family casks and things, but maybe Millstone, yeah, that could be true. I don't know, but in Scotland, certainly, I think we're the only whiskey in Scotland that if you want to have a Oloroso sherry cask experience whiskey from start to finish, I think Tamdhu's the only one. So, and that was a decision of Leonard, who is who's our owner, a bit of a maverick. I was at him with the World Whiskey Awards on Thursday night. He's amazingly well respected in this industry, and you know the way he's run his business, the way he does business is really, really important because you know his handshake is everything, and he has a 30-year-old distribution agreement with a company in France that he shook on. There's no contract. They shook on it 30 years ago. And it's amazing. So when he bought Tamdhu Distillery from Edrington, I think he took them out for lunch. He's quite good at taking them out for lunch. And he walked into the warehouses the next week and he said, I want to make only Oloroso matured whiskey. I want to make old style sherry cask whiskey from the Speyside. That's what I think Speyside whiskey is. That's what I want to do. And that made our volume aspirations go from here to here because you can only buy so many sherry casks. There's not an endless supply of them, unfortunately. And when you go to Spain, you understand why. Macallan are getting a lot of them, but also, you know, we want to have the best ones. We take the time to do them. And there's only so many cooperages and only so many European oak trees you can cut down at the moment. So, you know, the sustainability of them is hugely important, of course. But so that's our DNA, sherry cask whiskey. But the spirit's great as well. You saw the stills there in the photos, different shape, 3 sets of 2, and it's a 4 million litre distillery. Can be run by one person, unlike Glengoyne, which needs to be run by 2 or 3. That we actually have stillmen and you know, mash ladies as well. We have ladies that work there as well, which is great. But it's they're very different distilleries. But the one thing that strikes you about Tamdhu when you go there is it's big, and we've built many warehouses up there, but it's also beautiful. It's right by the space side. The distillery is not beautiful, but the location is fabulous. So time for a Tamdhu, I think.
Gordon, are the box malting still in play at Tamdhu as well?
No, they've been no. We got rid of them about probably about 5 years ago now. So they used to have salad in boxes, which is a way of malting barley from a French design, I think. Basically like a big swimming pool. Basically, with which where the malt was in there, it would rather than a malting floor, which is what every other distillery that does any percentage of their own maltings uses, is malting floors. But for us to refurbish them was ridiculously expensive, so we get our malt from Baird's. So we're on the Tamdhu 12. So this is the opening one in the range. And I love this. This is fabulous. This is probably got the most American oak of all of the whiskies that we have tonight. American oak sherry casks, of course. Now, what I would say, guys, is there is an excellent film that if you are interested in sherry casks, then you should absolutely watch it. I will put it in the chat towards the end. But it really helps explain the modern day sherry cask, because the modern day sherry cask is different to what it was in the 70s. And it's different to what it was probably 40 years before that. And it's down to a whole range of different things. But one of the major factors that makes sherry cask different is that in the 80s, they decided you have to bottle sherry in Spain, which meant that the casks that were used to transport sherry from Spain to the UK, which is what we then used, dried up. And these were those cheap European oak casks, or not cheap, but transportation casks made from European oak. And so we had to make our own casks, and it was people like Macallan at that point who took up the baton with that, to be fair to them. And you know, and from then on, that's where the sort of sherry seasoned cask comes from. And this is where I think people get a little bit confused. And I want to just keep people up to speed on this, is that if you hear the word sherry cask, you have to decide what it means to you. Now, because there's a huge diversity of what a sherry cask is across the industry. We're at the very top end. We are providing you with the best possible sherry casks to produce the best whiskey. And we're tying them up for the full term. If we were doing it totally commercially, why would we not mature for 10 years in 10 years in bourbon casks and then finish it for 2 years in sherry casks? That's what we could do if we were looking to you know, do it in a different way. It's not how we do it. We want to just produce great whiskey. So this is an 43% 12-year-old. It was a 10-year-old. We moved it up to a 12-year-old. And the entry point in the range. And it's just a fabulous example of it's not a sherry bomb by any stretch of the imagination. And as we go through this range, you'll see we increase that intensity of European oak, which takes us more to that richer style that some people may call a sherry bomb. But this is a beautifully balanced sort of creamy, sort of lemon cheesecakey, sort of, there's a bit of richness in there. There's a bit of little hint of cinnamon, but there's pineapple. There's a bit of fruit in here as well. And it's a fruity spirit as well at Tamdhu. It's a very different spirit, but yeah, beautiful whiskey. But you can tell there's a bit more weight to it, I think, than Glengoyne. A little bit more weight to the spirit. What do we think, everybody?
I think the spirit type maybe takes to sherry a little bit better for my palate than Glengoyne does. Both do, don't get me wrong. We just talked about how much I love both of these distilleries. Tamdhu's got sort of a lighter, almost slightly floral characteristic that I find just melds beautifully with sherry. I did a tasting for my club probably about a decade ago or so. Andrew will remember these. There were some old, like 1971, 72 Tamdhus. I think they were G&M in these light kind of custardy tubes and stuff. The spirit coming out of that distillery has always been incredible, no matter what it's gone into. And I think it's kind of tough to kind of go in a different direction without alienating, as you spoke about earlier, Gordon. But Tamdhu to me has transitioned into the heavyweight in sherry at this point, and it's pretty damn cool because I think Andrew, again, Harmony can attest to this. We have fanboys for Tamdhu now since when the 15 came in those blue boxes and we had stacks of it. It created a legion of Tamdhu people. It's almost like a cult around here, but the spirit just seems to work with sherry beautifully.
It does. No, it does. I mean, it also, I think I think the spirit, how it interacts with the cask will be different because it's a different spirit. So it actually interacts quite differently than Glengoyne does. I wanted to just show you this. So this whiskey, look at the color of that, right? That is, that is a that's called the Dalby Alley Dram. This is one that we do ourselves. I just want to show you something. That is European oak, first fill only, 10 years old, and it is about 61% alcohol. And that just shows you that anybody who has any lingering thoughts that dark whiskies mean old, can I just completely shoot that out of the box? That's the youngest, that's the darkest whiskey I have on my shelf, pretty much, and it's the youngest whiskey I have on my shelf.
From here, it looks almost like Loch Du Black. It's definitely not had any caramel, this one, but no, it's amazing, and it's an incredible whiskey. We do a very limited amount of it, but it just shows you that, there's still that perception darker means older or whatever. Darker means, doesn't mean it's better. It just shows you this magical way of how these casks can take a clear spirit and change it in a relatively short period of time, which is going to be, is there going to be lots of Tamdhu in here? Probably not. It's probably masked by a lot of first fill sherry. But when you taste the 18, you see how that evolves into what the 18 is. So maturation, I can talk about whiskey and maturation for ages. I'm amazed by it. I'm finding very incredible. I know a guy that needs a bottle of that. Probably Andrew and Harmony too.
Harmony, what are your thoughts on this before I share mine?
I was just gonna say I really like the American oak sherry cask on this. It seems a bit brighter, while still showcasing like the fig and raspberry notes, but I get more like stone fruit and less cinnamon, which I prefer. And it actually surprised me. I know I've done tastings with you in the past and we've done these lineups in person. But yeah, I just so far just like young to young in the lineup, or like 15 to 12. I'm preferring this Tamdhu 12 with the American oak sherry to the other one.
No, I mean, you speak to Sandy. Sandy bottled a cask about 4 years ago. He prefers American oak sherry.
Yeah,
that's a bit, if you get a full European oak, the big chewy monsters, they're like, they're quite hard work, but there's a vibrancy to American oak sherry which you don't get from European oak. When you combine them together, you can get that beautiful balance. But we've basically, in a very simple way, we take American oak in higher levels. In the 12 and the 15, it's more like that, and then the 18, the European oak goes up. So that's pretty much how it works.
Yeah,
Andrew, what do you think?
well, I actually like this, and I'll be honest, like I'm usually a cask strength guy or 46. But this is very drinkable. I think for the price point, it punches above its weight. It's good value.
Yeah.
I'd love to see some of these at a little bit higher ABV, but I still think it's great value. Gordon, I was going to make a comment quickly about that American oak. I mean, so many people are obsessed with color and they want dark, and they don't. I think a lot of them don't often realize what you're missing when you get those dark, natural dark colors. Is some of the subtlety, and you can sometimes still get it, but like people who are making like proper sherry for drinking, the bodegas are often after preferably American oak because it's not going to overshadow or overwhelm the wine as much as that Spanish or that Galician oak will do, which is just so powerful.
That's absolutely correct. So if you go to Jerez and you have a look at a Solera system, which is what they're making, though, making sherry to sell. They're not making sherry for the Scotch whiskey industry in these exclusive Soleras. Let's be very honest. What they're making, they make sherry for us as a separate entity to these. This is their crown jewels. This is what they make. It's a 4-layer system. You put young wines in at the top as you take, you cascade it down, just to be very. All those casks are American oak. They're all American oak. They're not European oak. And ultimately, they're vessels because sherry is an oxidation product. It's not an interactive product. So they're not really looking for much interaction from the oak. They're simply vessels just to allow that oxidative aging to happen. But I'm going to just to highlight what I was going to say. I want to just pull, because we were talking about it earlier. I just want to show you something. So what I'm just going to show you here is a 30-year-old Rosebank. Okay. So this is a whiskey which arguably, and is in our portfolio, and we'll be producing a spirit from here. These are pretty limited releases, but arguably some of the most sought after whiskies alongside one or two other distilleries. Now, Rosebank is probably the most spirit-driven whiskey in Scotland, arguably. There's not many others that you would think, it's spirit forward because it had such a unique style of distillation. Now, this is a 30-year-old whiskey. So I'm just going to show you. 30 years old. 30 years old. Oh, God, sorry, I'm having a bit of a 30 years old, 10 years old. Now, what's the difference? This is all first fill. This is all refills. So this is only refill casks. So you're not getting those big, bold flavors. You're getting a real, much more of a sort of lighter style. It's a lowland, lighter style whiskey, showcasing triple distillation, showcasing the elements in whiskey that are very, very different. And this is just a totally different experience. This is summer meadows, summer fruits, beautifully light, beautifully delicate, beautifully all the things arguably that other one isn't. But that's just why this industry is so great and why we're so lucky in Scotland to have such diversity. So that just shows you can have a really spirit forward whiskey that's fabulous as well. It doesn't have to all be of the cask, and that's how you make good single malt. Would you agree, guys?
100%. And you're definitely speaking to the right room here. We just had a Rosebank in one of our tastings just recently, and it absolutely whetted my appetite. I'm trying to trade for another one right now. So as soon as you've got some juice coming out of there, Gordon,
well,
nudge Andrew and say, let's do a tasting.
We'll do that. One minute. Well, right. We'll redo this when I have my first Rosebank out of the one we've made. So no, that would be great. So yeah, that's Tamdhu 12. So nice to actually taste Tamdhu 12 alongside Tamdhu 15, because you're going to see that increase in European oak. Yes, there's three more years of maturation, but the color difference is driven by the oak casks, not the age. So the increase in color with the 15 you get is down to the down to the additional European oak that's in here. So I get a little bit of this richer profile that comes through that you would expect. There's more of that slight tannic dryness that comes across this whiskey, which is great. This is fabulous though, but it's a different experience to the 12 significantly. So 46% non-chill filtered, natural color. Oh, beautiful nose, beautiful nose. And the way that we've made this, you can tell that there's still that Tamdhu spirit in there. That's great, but this, you can tell there's more European oak. There's a more intense nose, slightly darker, richer fruits coming through, but there's a little bit of that sort of, I get little hints of sort of, I just got a little whiff of licorice, bizarrely.
I can see that. Like proper licorice, not the
No, not the horrible stuff.
stuff.
Mhm. Better than Macallan. Oh, thanks.
Weird that we would put that on our website and not worry about it, but
But I mean, it's totally, yeah. But I mean, I think, you know, it's hey, they made the casks, they laid down the whiskey, we just blended it. So it does, you know, we've got to tip the hat. But it's a beautiful whiskey. And there's absolutely chocolate. Yes, there's oaky spiciness, but it's got this, your point about the spirit, I think is really interesting, Kurt. There's just this little bit more in a very simple way. It just affects the palate slightly differently than Glengoyne. You know, Glengoyne is this slightly lighter style, but still takes it. This just, I don't know, there's a toffee element to this.
it's more muscular, it's oilier, it's thicker.
It's a bit oilier, yeah. But I mean, this is gorgeous. This is gorgeous. But our problem,
Harmony hearts it, I think.
do you like that, Harmony?
She's hearting it.
I mean, I think, you know, our problem is that our stock profile is, at the moment, it's really 18 years. So our stock profile is like that. We need to get it more like that. That's the problem. But it's all about just remembering that, you know, what we do and we do it well. And that's what we've stuck to. And people are beginning to love Tamdhu for what it is. And I think the 15 for a lot of people, and I'm not saying everybody, but for a lot of people, the 15 is the epitome of what they like about it. The 18 the 18 is even more rich than this. And I love the 18. There's not much of that kicking around, I don't think. But the 15 is a beautiful stepping stone from, you know, almost 12 at one end, 18 at the other. The 15 is somewhere in the middle, you know. Oh, yeah,
It's Richard Pattersoning his whiskey right now by the looks of things. Kurt, are you holding it in there for 15 seconds without breathing?
I'm not, nor did I splash any on my carpet or anything either.
I'm not sure I buy into that, if I'm honest.
No, I'm just honestly joking.
But I mean,
Hell of a show, man.
oh, fabulous. I mean, what a guy. I mean, hell of a showman, hell of a guy.
Yes, showman.
And a huge advocate for our industry, and just fabulous. But I mean, gosh, yes, I haven't seen him for a while. Be nice to see him. But yeah, just I love it. And you know, there's all those sort of, what I like about it is there's all those European oak notes. They're all kicking around there, but nothing's overpowered, nothing's dominant. It just all works together. It's a really good dram. And your point was right, Andrew, about there was no way we were only doing this at 46. We were never doing this at anything else than 46.
Well, and Gordon, I understand. I mean, I understand why that's done for a lot of brands for the broader market. And, you know, just like with Glenfiddich, I mean, there's been a couple times when I've sat down and worked through their range, and almost everything they do is 40 or 43%. I'm still able to appreciate that there's incredible quality there. But not everyone is ready for or understands why 46 is there. And I think, you know, there, on the one hand, you have the financial reason for bottling at a bit lower strength and being able to stretch your liquid a little further. But then there's probably also a little bit of fear there that some consumers just are going to look at that number and that's going to scare them away.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a balance. It's also knowing who your consumer is, of course. And you look at how Springbank do it, and look at how these kind of brands do it. And they know if there's one brand in whiskey that knows their consumer, you could argue it's Springbank better than anybody.
Except they foolishly will not make enough of their product, or even remotely close to enough of their product.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done a bunch of tastings. We love talking about them because everyone there is awesome. Like they're wonderful people.
Yep.
And I love the ethos behind everything. And I'm not expecting them to make 21 million liters a year, but like for the love of God, they could produce half of Kilholman or half of Glengoyne. Maybe.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
No,
Anyway.
totally, yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, the word distillery capacity means nothing to Springbank. I like that. It's they do what they do, and
they have 3 times as many people working in their bottling hall as you guys do in production.
everything, and you have to live down there. You have to live in Campbelltown to work for them.
You do. Look, they're
lovely
a
people.
Wonderful company.
They are a wonderful company. They are a
Just
wonderful
make
company.
a little bit more whiskey and stop promoting it on Instagram.
So we've done the 15. Let's try the 18 with the
Oh.
15 and see how we step up to the step up in.
Gorgeous.
So the first thing to look at, yeah, it's a little bit darker, a little bit more European oak, 70% first fill European oak. So of the core range, this is the sherry bomb, I guess, if there's one, but it's not a bomb. It's just a beautiful explosion of all those beautiful European oak whiskey style.
Wow.
46.8. Now that was picked because of the fact that it was that was the best strength. We looked at 48, and we just actually felt that balanced off nicely at 46.8. So that's why we picked that. And the first thing you notice is just the thickness of this in the glass. You can see that European oak whiskey is much thicker. So yeah, it's a fabulous example of Tamdhu now at 18 years. We'll have a 21 in 2 more years, I think, hopefully. Let's try this.
Yeah.
The 21, what kind of casking are you doing for that? That's really cool.
It will probably be in the same area as this. It won't be. It'll probably be European oak forward, put it that way. I think when you're getting up to Tamdhu 21s, I don't think we would suddenly go probably to all American oak, but I think probably at the higher ages we've kept some European oak sherry cask back for that. But this just has that. So what you've noticed from the first one, from the 12, the sweetness has gone from sort of the middle front to now right to the back of the mouth. And that's European oak just driving that sweetness further to the back. That's what I noticed. One of the, people give me a whiskey and I go, what cask? They say, I don't really, if I get sweetness at the front, I go, it's probably more American oak. And if it's right at the back, it's more European oak. If you don't know anything about color, provenance, anything, it's not always the case, but thanks, Phil and Suzanne. But yeah, it's a beautiful, just a gorgeous whiskey. Got real mouthfeel, got real depth of flavor, and you get this. You start to get this cascade at the back, this sort of still tasting it type thing. Beautiful, but there's more of the raisins and the sort of dark fruit flavors and things like that you would, there's more that dominant European oak flavors, but there's still that subtlety of Tamdhu and a little bit of the refills bringing that through. Gorgeous. I haven't tasted.
I think you started to say something a few
I'm a
minutes
happy
ago.
boy. You know, when they poured this for us a few months back, we went, holy hell, what is this? This is incredible. We got lit up about the Glengoyne 15. We tried that first, and then this one was just like lights out. Have to have it. Brought it in right away.
Yeah.
I love this. This is not typically my wheelhouse. I'm typically, like we've talked about this a few times, refill ex-bourbon or even second fill, or go deeper, as long as you're going deep in years too. But when you get sherry that's working like this is unreal. Love the style.
Interesting that last question, that point there about Kurt hates whiskey aged in wine casks. I think it's funny. Red wine casks are the most polarizing whiskey cask maturation I think there is. There's some people that go, we produced one when I worked at Auchentoshan about 10 years ago. That was brilliant. It was 7 years old and about 60%. And I loved it. But then there's not many other wine casks I like. And you're right about wine. I'm like, some people go, red wine particularly can be just. Oof.
Gordon, I think the challenge is like a lot of companies let's just take it back a step on sherry to begin with. The whole concept of wet fill, where you're leaving a bit of sherry left in the cask. And that might work for some sherry cask matured whiskeys. I don't think it's not what I would consider to be best practice. But if you do that with wine, it just does not work. And I would say that I have had wine cask whiskeys that I like, but most of them fall into either they're rinsed before they're filled, or they go through that STR process before they're filled. But yeah, the wine notes, I think for me in a lot of whiskeys just get in the way and sometimes flat out ruin the experience. And it's odd because sherry is a type of wine, but I think the way that it's handled is different than the way that wine casks used for maturing whiskey are handled.
No, agreed. Yeah.
You'd almost think port would work as well as sherry would, being a fortified drink too, but I can't do port casks or wine casks typically. However, exactly what Andrew said, we're seeing more and more and more of that in the industry. We're seeing more rinsing and more STRing, and wine cask whiskeys are getting better and better and better. They tend to be really young right now. Unfortunately, I'm looking for a little bit more age on most of them that we're seeing finished in wine or matured in wine, but you can tell they're handling it properly now. You're not getting that weird, funky, fermenting note on it and stuff. It's going to be good for wine casks going forward. And I think Dr. Jim Swan was a savior for wine casks in the industry. There's a couple of people that are guilty for kind of ruining it, but I'm not going to mention any names there.
Oh, go on.
Take a page.
Are you talking about Pink Bruichladdich? Is that where you're going?
I am talking about Pink Bruichladdich, but let's move on from there. I'll take a page from Gordon's book, man, I don't know if there's hockey fans in the room. We've got the Lady Byng trophy, right? For the gentlemen. I think Gordon is our honorary Lady Byng winner here. He's like afraid to say anything bad about anybody. So let's stick with that.
I will say something about that's bad but the way that we work as an industry is reflected in how we work in it, why this industry does the way it does. And, I'm here to talk about my products and talk about what we do. Everybody else does great whiskies as well. It's not just us. So it's not my place to do it. It's not something that I would do, but as you guys, of course it is. It's up to you.
Well, we hide, Kurt and I and others hide behind what we call integrity by being honest. But the reality is we work with the people we like to work with because we like their products.
Totally. Yeah.
And look, we'll throw compliments towards distilleries like Macallan when warranted. In recent tastings, we've done their 12 sherry oak, their 18 sherry oak, and were shocked by how good they actually were. I think part of it is we have this cynical view sometimes of some companies not wanting to lose market share, but they're sometimes willing to compromise on what we believe to be their standards in order to maintain that. And I think that's where sometimes we get frustrated as people who are not just working in the retail, but also people who love whiskey and who value how our opinions are taken. Like, we don't want people to just buy stuff from us because we told them to buy it. We want them to buy it because we truly believe it's good.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's that, but and that's what makes you a successful independent retailer, because you're independent. The word in, you know, and if you don't have that credibility, then that's pointless, isn't it? So that's the point. So yeah, no, absolutely. So what do we think of the 18, everybody? Phil and Suzanne like it?
Cracker.
Isn't it just gorgeous?
Yeah.
I noticed it was one per person. I would suggest you should all take up Andrew's offer of that.
Well, it's one of those ones where I think we've been told we might get a small amount later this year, but what we have now is most of what we're going to have for most of the year. So it's that's the reason that's there, is we want it to get spread around.
Totally. And it's for me, when it came out, I was sort of involved in the tasting of it pre. But when it came out, presented the way it was, and I opened my sample bottle on a Saturday night and drank it, and I had it for about an hour. I was nosing it just for 20 minutes before I even started. It's fabulous, really, really good. So yeah, enjoy it for sure. It's a belter, but it is very limited because our stocks are, I think we've just flipped into 19 years and 2 months. So, you know, I think that's the oldest cask we have, apart from other casks, which we have, which are really, really old. But yeah, that's where we're sort of at with Tamdhu. So
I think that one probably has like most comfortable palate weight too. It just sits perfectly. It's a great arrival. The strength is brilliant. There's no heat to it. It's like, it's got a nice weight from oil and everything. It's like perfect palate whiskey.
Totally. Yeah, I absolutely agreed. And you know, I think when we made it, it was like you could, you know, John was like, I want to use as a good amount of first fill, but I don't want it to be too overpowered by first fill. And I think that's what's really interesting. And the other thing that I haven't really mentioned that's worth mentioning at these types of things is that when we talk about first fill, when you're talking about sherry casks, there's 3 sizes of sherry casks. So you've got butts, puncheons, and hogsheads. Hogsheads are the smallest. Hogsheads are the ones that can really drive that really heavy flavors. And but in a blend, how you use butts, puncheons, and refills and hogs, it's all amazing to see how you would use them to help you develop a whiskey and learn how you do that over time. It's very interesting because with bourbon barrels, they're all the one size. So you don't get that difference with bourbon barrels. Sherry barrels, sherry casks, you do. And so a 500-litre cask behaves very differently than a 250-litre cask. Funnily enough, though, the 250-litre cask is not half the price of a 500-litre cask. Such is life. Shall we move on to, I hope you all enjoyed that. That is an absolute belter. But shall we move on to the batch strength number 7?
Let's do it.
This is the Bond one. It's in the next Bond film.
Oh, really? I had no idea. That's exciting.
It's not.
I mean, Gordon, I was going to ask, who's the next Bond?
I don't even know who the next Bond is. That's a good point. They not picked him or her? I think it should be
her.
Oh,
yeah. I agree. I mean, I'm all for.
Me too, but it should be a bloke.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with him.
I mean, they did McAllen. What else? I don't know what else they've done in their. You know, I don't know if you saw this or caught this, but in the first Iron Man movie, of all whiskeys, Hunter Lang old malt casks somehow ended up getting
Yes, I remember seeing this.
which was crazy.
There was a great article about, yes, there was a great article of random whiskies that have turned up in films that nobody ever thought they actually paid for anything, you know, and it was the director's favorite. But Glengoyne was in one, and I can't remember which one it was. It's annoying me now.
Jeff's going to fact check that for us, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was, it was very good. But I had a friend of mine who did a film in Scotland, which was a remake of Whiskey Galore, which is obviously a very great film. But he said the problem was couldn't get a whiskey company to be involved because it's not responsible drinking. Nobody was going to touch it with a barge pole.
Oh, that sounds about right. I don't know if I've told it on one of our tastings before, but I have a funny adjacent story related to the Angels Share, which Charlie McLean was in, and
the film that Glengoyne, some of it,
yeah. We were up somewhere near Glendronach, and we were staying at the distillery, and we needed to find somewhere to eat. So they sent us to a town nearby, and it wasn't Huntley. I have no idea what the town's name was, but there was a little pub. And the other thing that was weird about it is the town appeared to be on a ridge, which most towns in Scotland are in the valley. So again, there was a whole bunch of things that were weird about it. And I was driving, so I wasn't intending to have even a single dram. And the guys who were with me were all asking questions about bottles on the bar. And I saw this bottle on the top shelf with a handwritten note for a label. And I said to the woman, I was like, "What's that?" And she said, "Oh, it's a top shelf dram. You'll not be interested." And I was like, humor me. And she gets the ladder out. She goes up, she pulls it down. She says, "Charlie McLean left this here. It's supposedly a cask sample of Macallan used in the filming of The Angels Share." And I said, "Well, how much does it cost a dram?" And I think there was 4 or 5 of us. And she said, "Oh, it's a top shelf dram. It's 5 pounds." I said, "Perfect. Let's get doubles for all of us." And that's what we drank.
Oh, top shelf dram.
Top shelf dram, 5 pounds.
Love it. 57.5%. Yeah. It doesn't know. Look, we're going back to what we said about Glengoyne here. Doesn't nose of it, doesn't appear of it. Beautifully, lots of Tamdhu in here. I think I can't remember the cask makeup, but I think it's quite American oak forward, which would make sense, I think, with the profile. Age would be similar. Probably we're looking around about 10, 11. But I mean, this is the kind of thing when I say that, I'm talking average age here. So we may have some good 8-year-olds in there and some 12s, but the average is probably about 10. But yeah, I mean, a great example of, and if you look at full sherry cask matured, cask cask strength whiskey, there's very little of it around. I don't think, you've got Abelard Abuna. Did Glendronach do a cask strength?
They have. We haven't seen one in years, though.
No. Glenfarclas obviously do, but to have a sort of, but this is actually technically batch strength, so we have added a dribble of water to this. So, but it is very close to what the strength would be. So, the reason why it's probably been reduced a little bit, this Dalby Alley is at 62.5, which I showed you earlier. A lot of Tamdhu was filled into cask at off the still strength, or about 69-70% alcohol, to save on warehouse space. That's the main reason they did it. So they created hogsheads out of 5 bourbon barrels and filled them at higher strength to save on warehouse space. That's one of the reasons they did it. But that's why we've probably just added a little tiny bit of water into this. But a great one to finish on, but again, I wouldn't actually call this a sherry bomb. This is quite a beautiful rounded experience. There's some nice subtlety of this sort of vanilla. I think the tasting note says Pavlova, which I'm like, nice. But for me, there's a bit of those sort of dried apricots, a bit of oak spice in there. You know, I think even a little bit of sort of but it's not old, but it's got lovely length. It's not sharp. It's not any of that. It's lovely. Fabulous. And each one again has been a bit different.
Gordon, I was trying to look up the cask makeup on this, and the only thing I could find was that it was exclusively Oloroso sherry. So probably,
Yeah, I think
first and second fill.
but from the tasting note or from the style, I would say it's got a bit of American oak forward in it, and there'll be Europe and there'll be refills in there. But for me, it's a bit like it's not far off a cask strength 12. For me, that's a bit out the 3 we've had. It's more a cask strength 12. But it's lovely. It's really, really good. I hope you like it. Good one to finish on. And again, I think it's, good whiskey, bang for your buck as well.
Absolutely. Kurt, Harmony, any tasting notes from either of you?
I don't necessarily have specific notes other than I'm really enjoying it. It's a bit spicy and leaning not as sherry forward as the last one, a little bit more gingered and
It's a bit. It's 57.5%, but there's a subtlety to it. There's a slight subtlety to this.
Yeah.
You'd put the 18 down as a bit more of a sherry bomb than this, if you know what I mean, because it's got more European oak first fill in it. So yeah, I love all these batch strengths because of the sort of, they're very drinkable.
Yeah, they really are. It's really nice. I'm really enjoying it. I'm surprised too. Like I didn't have low expectations. I just hadn't tried it. So it's nice.
Kurt?
Yeah, this is, like I said earlier, this is what supplanted Avila Arbona for me and for where I take customers now. It's incredible whiskey. It's got more of those jammy fruits that Arbona used to have and doesn't have so much anymore.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of sherry, and not a lot of sherry, sorry, a lot of cherry. And that's going to be dried fruit, and that's going to be ex-bourbon too. You always get a lot of those cherry notes in bourbon, right? This one pips the other cask strength for me tonight. I love this whiskey. It's batch upon batch upon batch. They've all been really good.
Yeah, they are all good. Yeah, and they've all been a little bit different, like the Glengoyne Cask Strength. So I hope you've enjoyed them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, normally, often we would have a poll, but as Evan set the tasting up and is not here, we are not able to offer a poll tonight. So if you want to throw it in the chat, your favorite whiskey tonight, before we wrap, which will be shortly here, because we are sympathetic to the fact that it is now almost 2 a.m. for Gordon. And you're joining us from Glasgow, I'm guessing, tonight?
I am, but I've got a little bit of a nightcap I'm going to have. I'm going to have this as my nightcap before I go to bed.
Tell us about your nightcap. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a pretty decent nightcap.
It's a pretty decent nightcap. So that's a very old. This is one of the best whiskeys I've ever had. There's not much left, unfortunately. But look at the color of that. Beautiful.
Kurt's suggesting that you're flexing a little bit there, and that's okay.
And I don't think anybody's going to outflex him tonight either. Well done. Well done.
I have a little sip of that just before I go to bed.
I might have a little bit of that Tamdhu 71 lying around here somewhere, but that Gordon MacPhail one.
Oh, right, yeah.
But I have no idea where it is. It's somewhere down here.
You've got a few drams, but few good drams behind you, I'm sure. No, it's look at so we've got people got Tamdhu 18 and Tamdhu 15.
Yeah.
Both, yeah. Tamdhu 18-year-old times 2.
Well, technically there was 2 of them in the chat. I think that's why they were doubling.
Yeah, filling, yeah.
So Kurt and Harmony, quickly, favorites from the 2 of you tonight. Starting with Harmony, ladies first.
I like the 18s. They're both different. I just really enjoyed them. It's not something I've experienced often, so it's nice to try them. But and I'll just add that the Tamdhu Batch Strength really surprised me, and I really like that. Yeah.
Curtis.
Yeah, Tamdhu 18, I think pretty obvious from the glazed look I got in my eyes probably for a minute or two while I was sipping and nosing that one. And then super, I expected to like the stuff that was older a little bit more than this one. but that's a particularly wicked batch of the Tamdhu Batch Strength. So that'd be my number 2 tonight.
I'm going to keep this real simple. I'm going Tamdhu 1518. Those are my favorites tonight. They're classic, they're elegant, and they're what I'm expecting. I love the Glengoyne range. Surprisingly, I think the 15 of all the Glengoynes might have been my favorite in that range. And I think I like the fact that it's not trying to be something, it's just good.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a great, solid 15-year-old that I love it. I'm really happy with how it's come out. I've always been a Glengoyne 18, has always been and I'm sad to see it go. And I'm a huge Glengoyne 18 fan. I really love the 15. But for me personally, I think I don't know, the batch strength just at the end there is just sort of, I don't know, I can't pick. I love them all, but I have to. I don't have to, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, you got to represent.
Yeah, exactly. So
well,
no, I'm very lucky. Ultimately, the key point here is I'm very lucky. We make some very good whiskies, so that makes my life quite easy.
You do. Well, Gordon, I want to say a huge thank you to you for doing
Not
this.
at all.
I'm sure we'll see you out our way again soon.
Hope
I
so.
think at some point we're going to have to do a Rosebank plus 6 other whiskeys tasting, where we just open a bottle of Rosebank 30 or 31, and then everything else just happens to be something in your stable. But the whole excuse of it is just to open a bottle of Rosebank, because that whiskey should be drunk. It shouldn't just be put in glass cases and look.
No, it should be drunk. It absolutely should be drunk, and we're when you drink it, you're like, I mean, very different to most of the whiskies we've had tonight, but just coming at it from a very, a lowland. Again, not talking about regionality, but just a lighter style whiskey, triple distilled. Worm tubs is the oddest type of setup for making whiskey. Why you would ever think of doing that? Nobody would ever think of doing that, but that's what they did. So that's what we're doing. So yeah.
Well, keep
yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to see you all. I hope you enjoyed it. They're great whiskies, and yeah, nice to see you. If anybody needs any more information, I'm on Facebook, Instagram. We can find. Yeah. Andrew can get in touch with me. Whatever. I'm here to answer any questions if you have any. Absolutely. Not right now though, because I'm going to bed.
Important, as we've talked about before, we're going to have to add a day to your itinerary next time so you can ski in the Rockies.
Yes, so, I'm going to have to do that.
We'll hook that up.
Yeah, anyway, definitely.
Gordon, once more, huge thank you. Thank you to Trajectory Beverage, the importer in Alberta, for all the brands, because they helped support this tonight. Thank you to all of you for taking part. Have a wonderful night. We'll hopefully talk soon, and take care.
Cheers, guys. Take care. Enjoy your evenings.
Night all.